Three, two, one. Main engine ignition, liftoff. Most of the people think that space travel is about the rocket, the spaceship, or the destination. But actually there's much more that is behind this. Today, we are going to talk about some of the variables that we actually need to consider when we become serious about going to the moon, to Mars, and possibly beyond of that. We're going to use an illustration, and the illustration will be a trip, a small trip that I would like to do between Bremen and Hamburg. I wake up in the morning, I actually take a look at the schedule, I actually see what are the options for travel, take considerations of price, I will actually consider what are the open attractions, if there's any in this time, and I will actually have a plan. But you see, all of these occurs with a baseline of infrastructure that exists that allows me to actually take this trip without considering that it's going to be dangerous to my life and that it's going to be unsurmountable. That means that this is an easy task. So with regards to the illustration, we're going to choose today to travel by car, and we're going to use the highway. First of all, why the highway? Well, the highway is an infrastructure. There's four elements that we're going to be discussing today, and that is the structure of travel, availability of enabling services. Third point is the opportunities to manage contingencies, and fourth, how we actually get information from all of this infrastructure. Okay, you see, when we wake up and we want to actually do this small trip, our decisions are actually considering a great deal of opportunities that allows us to maintain comfort during our journey. How will our decisions change if instead of 150 kilometers, we actually travel 500 kilometers? What would I actually change on my behavior if I want to go instead of Hamburg to Munich? What if now, instead of going 800 kilometers south, I want to go 800 kilometers up to the space station? Now think about it for a second. What would you do when you want to actually travel 387,000 kilometers to the moon, or 54 million kilometers to the closest point of Mars from Earth? The complete environment actually changes, and from that perspective, the variables of thought are different. Let's start. The road. The road is representing that structure of transportation. We actually have to abide on rules. Yes, there are rules to be followed on entry point to the highway. There's going to be a speed limit. There's going to be a trajectory that is defined by that road, and it is actually going to be following an element of efficiency that has been predetermined by somebody else. Let's move to the space realm, okay? When we go into these considerations, we actually have now the theory of orbital definitions, okay? Bodies in motion. We are actually not going to Mars where it is today, or to the moon where it is today, but when it will be 250 days later. That's where we actually want to be. Now, I am not talking about the size of the rockets, size of the engines, size of spaceships, because these elements are technological preconditions that we have. These preconditions give you the available duration, the available size of the vessel. It will actually do a limitation of the size of a crew, and will actually give you indications of what amount of commodities you actually have to carry on your journey. So from this side, the first thing that we actually need to conclude is we have to obey certain elements of rules that will enable the journey to occur. And these rules will be physical in motion and also environmental in nature. We will have then to consider what is the environment that we are going to have and how we are going to manage ourselves within it. The next element on this highway is the presence of enabling services. and it's actually a very simple idea that you experience in everyday life. When you actually take your trip, you know as a fact that there's going to be rest areas, that you are going to have service stations where you can actually get nourishment, food, fuels, or commodities. This is quite interesting from the perspective of space travel. When we actually talk about space travel, we need to start thinking if we actually need to perform a network of enabling services. Today's philosophy runs a little bit like a camping trip. I actually take with me everything that I need. Food that I will need, fuel that I will actually need to actually get to my destination and return, and I will have to address topics for waste management and other elements that are of importance to keep my life support systems going. You may ask, why is this so important? First of all, it's because we are not going to have them at the beginning, because our first endeavors usually are more of exploration that are on a philosophy of self-sufficiency. But when we actually move onto a consideration of long-term planetary habitation, these are elements that you can actually prepare in advance. Okay? When you actually take your trip, you actually consider what would be the highest level of discomfort that you can experience on the road. And you will know that if you want to actually have a bite to eat, you will stop at the service station and you will buy yourself a sandwich. It's not magical, but there's a lot of effort behind that sandwich that has actually placed a supply chain timed with a service of meal preparation that is compatible to your arrival and to your need for nourishment. Now, this doesn't occur in space easily. That has to be an intentional plan where you need to be providing a very definite rate of consumption that will take care of the people on board. Also, when we actually consider the situation of resources, we may be a little bit away from the capabilities of the vessels to be able to actually sustain these trips, not because we do not have the technologies, but by the sheer size. And then is when this supply chain, interstellar supply chain, could become an important solution. What could be done in these cases? For example, do we need to actually start thinking about sending resources in advance of our arrival and have a parking lot of resources in orbit, let's say Mars, waiting for us once we get there? Second of all, do we need to consider our trip now on a basis of a constellation of spaceships that will have docking capability, and we use resources and reject the luggage as we go in order to actually maintain a possibility to manage our environments and our needs? Third, how about, for instance, sending resources that will be placed into the trajectory that we are going to follow? So now we have to consider that we are not only targeting Mars or the stars, but we are targeting our own spacecraft where we are going to be in a certain part of the journey. We may have today the technology to be able to overcome these problems of the travel, but not the environments that will actually support the comfort for the travelers. The spacecraft may be too small. We will have to actually consider to build maybe the bigger spaceships directly in space, but we could actually think about slicing the problem into little bits and actually providing ourselves solutions that are actually piecemealed to the need of that crew that needs to travel. Our assumptions here on Earth actually are similar to those on the space travel, but the difference is that we do not consider the trip as life-threatening. And from this perspective, it offers a different sense of informality to what we need to achieve on the space business. From my perspective, this topic of enabling services is fundamental to ensuring that we increase the probability of survival of the crew over the course of the journey. Yes, because the topic here, and it will be addressed in the next part of the presentation, of the discussion, is what happens when we run into trouble. What will we do when we actually have to exercise one of our contingency operations? What will I do if my resources start to go low? If my car breaks, I know that there's going to be a tow service available within a 1 or 2 hour time frame. If I'm running low on fuel, there's going to be a service station nearby. If I go hungry, I know that the worst case scenario is that I will have to wait 1 hour and a half to actually reach my destination in Hamburg. If I actually forget my toothbrush, there's going to be housekeeping availability in the hotel that I have at my destination. All of these elements have been there before I actually engaged on the trip, okay? When we actually start the space travel activities, we will be opening grounds to others to come. That would be the purpose, okay? Unless we are just going to do scientific missions where we go, look, and come back. But when we become serious, we need to understand that these elements of resolution become really more important on enabling really the people to actually have a higher chance of survival. And some of the people say, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, the trip is so cool, it's so great that I don't care if I actually die at the end. Well, this is not an element that we actually can accept as a methodology to manage the mission. We need to actually have the desire to leave and the desire to return. We have to have these core reasons to actually exist in this new environment, okay? So this topic of contingencies or problems, how do we actually resolve them on these travel arrangements? Okay, we could actually say we build redundancy. We actually are failure tolerant. There are ways that if something breaks down, I actually can continue to receive the same function for a limited period of time to actually make my destination, or I actually have operational means. I do things differently such that I can actually get to my goal. Those are active solutions that we use today. We actually have more of everything. More food, more air, more fuel. We actually have more of everything. Now, this represents a problem because it will actually increase the element of risk when you actually lose one of these commodities. So everything in the same place. Isn't there a saying that you should not place your eggs in the same basket, all your eggs in the same basket? Well, this would be a similar situation. What would happen if one of these items actually gets lost? What about medical emergencies? This would be critical. These are elements that from the technology are available to us today. But if you follow my thought, I actually have mentioned always a philosophy of consumption. Yes, and this is one of the elements that places the travel into a higher risk. I actually pack my luggage, pack my lunch, pack my fuel. I'm consuming. I actually do not replenish, and as such, the risk that the elements will actually run out of time is higher. Now, the idea behind this would be, could we actually think about permaculture elements or like the development of biospheres where we can actually regenerate some of these resources, or actually changing our protein-based needs to sources that would be friendly to the zero-G environments. This will actually have to change our minds from the perspective of that steak that you have on Sunday lunch to maybe a bowl of bugs that you will actually enjoy in zero-G on your way to Mars. Also, when your environment gives you so little space, you have to realize that another element of solution is to actually have your knowledge diversified amongst the crew. This means that you actually have multiple roles within your mission. You may be the commander of the mission, be the doctor, comms expert, be the expert of hydroponics, the robotics expert, but you're also the architect that will be enabling the construction of infrastructure, both space or ground, in arrival to your destination. So What I'm trying to actually convey is that not only we will have to actually think about how we use the resources, how we plan ourselves, but how we build biospheres that will actually give us the chance to replenish these resources, and how the knowledge that we actually have distributed amongst our team will actually offer us the opportunities to handle the diversity of problems that we could face. It is not if we will face problems, it is when we face problems. Returning to our illustration, the next element that we consider for today's dissertation is the information availability. And now I actually have the consideration that I have information at destination that has allowed me to learn when should I arrive, what will be the situation when I arrive, and what can I do when I arrive. And this information is really important. Not only that at destination, but the highway infrastructure is actually giving you information about the environmental elements of your journey that may not be necessarily impacting you at that point in time, but will give you a chance to take decisions to the future. In the same manner, when we actually think about long-term interplanetary occupation or exploration, it should be important to know that we require sensors, technology, elements that will actually tell us what is the situation at destination, and also what is the situation during our journey. So, could we think about an array of communications that would be placed on that trajectory that we will be using over and over and over to be able to know what is happening during our trip? We actually have today technologies that allow us to actually do Earth observation. We actually have infrastructure that allows us to locate ourselves very accurately through GPSs. Would this mean that we could actually put GPS systems already in Mars in preparation of our arrival? It could be an idea. Today, we actually have active communications between the surface of Mars and Earth. We can see, as you saw in the news, live pictures on a very high resolution of the surface of a different planet, and we can take advantage of this information. The element of information availability becomes very important when we think about recurrence. We will not do this once, we will do this again and again and again. And as such, we need to understand how we will keep this connection to this journey. What is the situation today? Today, we are seeing humankind returning to moon. And this is now the first elements of concept evaluation and proof that we will be able to do these activities in the long term. We will actually have a space-based station orbiting the moon. We are planning of a space habitat, the moon village, on the surface to be able to prove the concepts of biospheres and interplanetary regeneration. Yes, and we will see from there how we can actually jump to these interplanetary injections. I thank you all for your attention and have a great day.